Right, good morning, Year 2 law students. Today is Saturday morning, the 15th of April. A quick topic on Actus Reus from the Year 1 textbook. Let's start off by quickly defining what the Actus Reus is. It's simply where the defendant commits the wrongful or guilty act. The Law Commission expands on that and refers to the Actus Reus as or the external elements of an offence apart from the mens rea. So a typical example of how the Actus Reus works is depending on the offence and the source of law that defines the offence, normally the source of law will explain what the Actus Reus is. For example, murder, the Actus Reus is simply the unlawful killing of a person under the King's peace. Theft will simply be appropriating property belonging to another, and these are all defined under for theft, for example, it's defined under the Theft Act section 1, and for murder is defined by the common law. Now, another thing to remember about the Actus Reus is it has to be voluntary. Hill and Baxter, so the defendant must want to do the wrong thing as defined by the source of law. The other thing to remember is to do with Actus Reus and omissions. There is no Good Samaritan law in the United Kingdom. However, there are prescribed examples where a defendant is required to act. So if you have a statutory duty, if a police officer pulls you over and asks for a breath sample, then you must give that sample. If you fail to do so, then you would have omitted and therefore potentially have committed an offence. Relationships, so if you have responsibility for children, for example, Gibbons and Proctor, or if you voluntarily assume responsibility, Stone and Dobinson, then you must act to make sure that you look after persons in your care. If you have a public duty, for example, Ditham, again, you must act as required. And if you have a contractual duty, again, Pitwood, these are all typical examples of where you must act. The next thing to think about in terms of the Actus Reus, and again, keeping an eye on the time, is to do with causation. That's a big part in proving the commission of an offence, especially if you're dealing with result crimes. So the but-for test or factual causation, Paget, but for the defendant's behaviour, the victim would not have been injured and so on, or even fatally killed. The other point in relation to causation is legal causation. Kimsey, you've got Smith as well, and that's to do with where the defendant has done more than enough to be blameworthy. Legal causation is particularly relevant where you have intervening acts. But I think it's quite key to remember that under Actus Reus, an intervening act is hardly going to or unlikely to break the chain of causation. So examples of intervening acts will be the act of the victim themselves in Deer, medical intervention in Cheshire and so on. Jordan, we know, is now bad law, so always remember that. So that's quite important in terms of where you have other persons involved in harm committed against the victim apart from the act committed by the defendant. That's where legal causation comes in. You have to work out whether the chain of causation has been broken or not. So what else for Actus Reus? I'm just trying to think. So we looked at causation. I think so long as you remember the definition of Actus Reus, you remember that it has to be voluntary, you remember that there are certain circumstances where you must act, otherwise you could commit the Actus Reus through an omission. Also remember causation, so factual causation and legal causation. And the other point to remember is that intervening acts hardly break the chain of causation. So novus actus interveniens, a new intervening act would hardly break the chain of causation unless there's clear evidence that either the victim has either completely healed, for example, in the case of a wound, and the other party does something exceedingly more serious to aggravate the original injuries. Otherwise, the chain of causation is hardly ever broken. So that's a quick summary of Actus Reus. Please read chapter 19 of the Year 1 textbook to supplement your knowledge, and just to remind you that these videos are only really very short overviews to prompt your memory to work hard on the actual topic by referring to the textbook. Right, good morning, and I shall hopefully see you for my last video for the Easter series on Sunday the 16th of April. Have a good morning, and see you again on Sunday. Bye-bye.